So I'm Tim Martin, and I'm from Joshua Tree in Los Angeles, California. So this truck is a 1995 Safari Vehicles SV1, and it was originally built in the late 90s as a complete package and sold as the camper and truck together. The most unique feature of this truck is really the composite box on the back of it. It was really ahead of its time for when it was built in the late 90s, especially for North America. On this one, we did a nice big pass-through between the cab and the camper. So being able to really move back and forth between the two, crawl through it, kind of opens the space up a little bit more. All right, so this is the front of the truck, and this actually was not the original chassis, but it's the same series. The shell was separated from the chassis originally, so we've reunited a similar truck. This truck actually came in 1995 as a BLM fire truck in northern Nevada. The color of this truck is due to the fact that it was a fire service truck back in the day. The fluorescent green was what the BLM used for all their fire rigs, and that's why we've kind of got this unique color on the front of it. And it's got some really interesting features to it. The first being a really kind of weird and different asymmetrical hood, which Mercedes did as a way for the driver to be able to see down to the road and have better visibility. It's also got an artillery hatch or roof hatch to be able to kind of do some photography and stuff out of the top. It's running a 4-cylinder diesel motor. It's a OM364 Mercedes motor, and that is a intercooled turbocharged motor in the truck. All right, so some other features of the truck originally, it came with CTIS, its central tire inflation system that allows the vehicle to air up and air down as driving for different types of road conditions. So changing a tire on this truck is definitely a chore. And there's some tips and tricks for getting these wheels on and off. Definitely big torque wrenches and an electric impact. And you actually can use a shovel to kind of maneuver the tire onto the wheel. They are pretty heavy, between 200 and 300 pounds depending on the tire. There's a number of projects underway, including a 50-gallon custom gas tank that's going to be put in here to extend the range of the vehicle. We've also recently done some additions of cabin pass-through to allow passage between the camper and the truck. We've also installed a few jerry cans and some storage boxes. We're also making some extensions for the cab that will swing up, that are doors that allow it to access kind of some of the storage on the vehicle. The construction of this camper was pretty unique for the era. It was two clamshells, molds that they made a fiberglass top and a fiberglass bottom, and then they glassed them together. And that fiberglass was about a 1/4 inch thick, 1/8 inch thick. From there, they actually used a composite honeycomb panel, which was really rare for this era. That was laid into the inside of that shell, and then another layer of fiberglass was applied. So it made a really strong but really light monocoque style design. You can see all of the molding was really custom. Features were molded specifically for the chassis, and this was really designed just for this truck. The style of construction was really unique for North America. There was really nothing at the time done similar to this, and even in Europe, where these trucks were more common, this was still not a really common method. It resulted in a shell that's pretty light. It's about, without the windows, about 940 pounds. Really structurally pretty rigid. Moving on here, we've got a ladder that swings out for entry. Also all German hardware. We've retained all the original hardware that was with the truck as we've kind of refurbished it. The shell was painted and some cracks and things were repaired from years of storage. And it's got the original Dometic windows in it, which we've been able to retain and use. They're double pane, so they're heavily insulated. And the cabin's heavily insulated as well, so it really is a great cold weather camper. I've owned the cabin for about 8 years, and we've been looking for the right vehicle to place it back on. This series Unimog is very rare. Only 3,300 were ever produced in the world. In the US, there's, we think, less than 10. So the inside of the truck, we've done just a first coat of paint here. We'll do an additional, it's a bilge paint just for epoxy paint to kind of protect the interior. But you can see a lot of the original hand-laid fiberglass. The interior we're kind of doing in a Moroccan theme, really trying to kind of introduce some interior design and architecture kind of into the cabin build. Again, you can see kind of all the original Dometic windows. Those have integrated screens and shades built into them, which is a really cool feature. On the interior here, you can see this truck's had a little bit of wear. We're putting some new Shieldman seats in here, upgrading those. All of the floor will come up, and we'll be putting in some insulation and some sound deadening to kind of improve the environment inside the cab. We're really excited about those seats though, just ergonomically making this truck more comfortable. It does have a air ride seat in it currently, which kind of helps with some of the ride and how the truck handles down the road in terms of how the driver feels in the seat. So here we are in the cab, and this is absolutely filthy in here. We're about to take the majority of the interior out to start soundproofing the metal floors and everything. But a couple notes in the interior, you've got a shifter with a split here. So you've got 8 forward gears, kind of in a standard format. Total, we're gonna have 32 forward gears. We've got a high and a low and reverse. And then we also have a gear reduction, planetary gear reduction in the axles. So that all adds up to about 32 forward gears. We have a air locker, and we're also gonna have a central tire inflation system up here to monitor the tire pressure in the vehicle. The rest of the interior is pretty standard, kind of mid-90s layout, and that kind of wraps up the interior here. So a little bit about the company that built the box. They were originally called Safari Vehicles Manufacturing. It started about 96, 97, we think. We don't know a ton about the company. However, they did produce some pretty significant trucks in the early days of overlanding. They molded 3 of these shells like the one on the back of this truck. One of those they completed and finished and sold off, and that vehicle sold around $150,000 back in 1998. This box was molded, but it was never actually finished. It's the second serial number. The third one was never even mounted to a truck, but this one was mounted to a vehicle, and the interior is built out about halfway before the company unfortunately went bankrupt. Before going bankrupt though, and while working on these trucks, they also built a vehicle called the ER2K, which was for a gentleman named Bill Swales. Bill went on to form a company called Earth Roamer, who's a big supplier of expedition trucks today. And Safari built the first truck that he kind of drove around in and had a blog kind of documenting all of his travels through North America. So before Safari went out of business, they garnered a lot of attention on this truck back in the late 90s. It was featured in a ton of US magazines. One of them was Four Wheeler. You can see there was an article here. It was also in Peterson's Four Wheel, featured here, the prototype version. Even in Playboy magazine, I try to open this to the right page here, but another featured article, and also in Motorhome magazine. So there's a lot of press originally on the vehicle, a lot of attention. Unfortunately, the company was unable to import this particular Mercedes truck to America, so they ultimately were able to design a version of the truck on a F-350, which they planned on launching in the United States. However, they ran out of cash before that happened, from what we can understand, and were never able to launch that vehicle in the US. The inspiration from this build really came from 4 months on the road last year in a spring and summer camper that I have. And just looking backwards towards where Overland has come from and where we are today, and wanting to tell some of those stories of the origins of Overland, 25, 30 years ago. So this truck really was about sharing that back with the world and bringing it back to life in a way that others could view and see.